language teaching and learning from an intercultural perspective. The role of language education is to prepare language learners for meaningful communication outside their own cultural environment and to develop in language learners a sense of themselves as mediators between languages and cultures. Intercultural language teaching and learning centers on the relationship between languages and culture. A cultural orientation implies the development of knowledge about culture that remains external to the learner, and it's not intended to change or transform the learner's existing identity, practices, values, attitudes, beliefs, and worldview. Rather than that, the learner needs to engage with language and culture and elements of meaning-making system that influence and are influenced by each other. This means that language learning becomes a process of exploring the ways of language and culture relate to learners and target language and culture. The interculturality involves not only awareness, but also the ability to analyze, explain, and elaborate this awareness, which is meta-awareness. One problem in intercultural language teaching and learning has been to articulate complex views of the nature of the intercultural as a construct that can be identified for teaching and assessment. When we look at deeper in pedagogy, an interculturally oriented pedagogy for language teaching and learning starts from the view that language, culture, and learning are fundamentally integrated. One important feature of intercultural language teaching and learning that needs to be considered is that it doesn't constitute a language teaching method. There is no set of pedagogical practices for intercultural language teaching and learning. Intercultural language teaching may be considered as a post-methods pedagogy in that it consists of theoretical orientation that frames options and principles that are to be adapted by teachers in their own location, specific practice. This means that in developing a pedagogy of intercultural teaching and learning, it is necessary to recognize the classroom as a cultural context in which teachers and learners' experiences and expectations are shaped by the linguistic and cultural backgrounds that each brings to the classroom. Let the code propose a set of principles for that: active construction, making connections, interaction, reflection, and responsibility. We would like to show an intercultural language teaching activity in here, which is created by us. It is different festivals in different countries. Students age of 14, the language level can be elementary or pre-intermediate. Before the activity, teacher asked the question of what are your special festivals in your country, what are different festivals around the world, and makes students a mind map. Students give different answers such as Ramadan, Eastern, Christmas, Thanksgiving, like that. And then teacher asks different types of questions, double H questions. What are the routines? Are there any similarities or differences? What kind of food they are eating on that day? Like that. And the main activity is teacher asks students to be separated into groups, and they are supposed to create a new festival for our world, referring to similarities and differences of those festivals from their countries and in the target country, of course. After they created a new festival, they will present their own festivals in front of the class. And then teacher asks students, which festival do you want to attend, why or why not, and how do you feel about different traditions, cultures, and cultural acts and festivals around the world? The key features of this activity that involves students in process of noticing, comparing, interacting, and reflecting. They're noticing There are different types of festivals, and they're comparing their similarities and differences and different traditions. They're interacting while they are doing their presentation, also creating their festival, and they are reflecting how they feel. Constructing the background cultures of the learner and target culture is equally valid. Viewing at instances of language use as experiences of culture and opportunities for culture, and encouraging the inclusion of multiple perspectives. If we move on and if we look at the ethnographic orientation, the ethnographic orientation is sought to introduce direct experience of another culture into the formal language learning context. The fundamental prerequisite for an ethnographic approach to intercultural language teaching is an experience, typically an out-of-class experience of another culture. It has been particularly focused on experiences gained through study abroad programs, which is Comenius, Erasmus Plus, or Erasmus. If we look at computer technology, it has been used as a way of bringing language learners and members of the target language communication into contact for the purpose of language and intercultural learning. With the technology, we have access to video, audio text, cartoons, and written text. Those were different types of ways in which language educators seek to integrate intercultural learning in language programs.
And we're gonna go on with process of learning. There is one model for process of learning we're going to look at today, developmental model of intercultural sensitivity by Bennett and Allen. This is one of the most developed model of intercultural acquisition. It provides a basis for understanding the development of intercultural acquisition. The model aims to explain how learners' abilities to work in an intercultural context, to identify and appreciate cultural differences, and to develop strategies for dealing with cultural differences in communication evolve over time. The model consists of two large sets of stages, ethnocentrism and ethnorelativism. Ethnocentrism is the tendency to see one's own cultural perspective as the center of reality. It is divided into three stages: denial, defense, and minimization. Ethnorelativism is a conscious recognition of all behaviors, including their own in a cultural context. It is divided into three stages: acceptance, adoption, integration. Denial, learners have not yet developed a conceptual category of cultural differences. Defense, learners have gained some ability to notice cultural differences as the result of some form of exposure to other languages and/or cultures. Minimization, the problems confronted in the defense stage are resolved by assuming a basic similarity among all human beings, either in terms of physical universalism or a transcendent universalism. In ethnorelativism, acceptance is that learners develop an understanding of their own cultural context and so can accept the existence of different cultural contexts too. Adoption, learners are able to shift their cultural frame or reference and consciously adopt perspectives of other cultural groups. Integration, at the final stage of development, learners extend their ability to perceive events in a cultural context to their perceptions of their own identity. A progression in intercultural learning from a point where cultural assumptions are based on first cultural perspectives, which are then modified by inputs such as textbooks and materials. When the input is appropriate, students then develop a more complex understanding of the phenomenon, adding greater nuancing to their understanding of the phenomena being learned. Here we can see the map. This complexification then appears to provide a basis on which the target culture and the first culture can be linked in constructive ways that increase understanding of each other. The process eventually leads to decentering from first culture perspectives so that the learner becomes able to use target culture perspectives to understand his or her own cultural nature. The process of development is complex and non-linear. The progress should be seen in terms of developing complexity in the way of understanding and responding to linguistic and cultural differences rather than developmental stages. And we have assessment part. Assessments. One approach to assess interculturality is to evaluate intercultural communicative behavior. In this way, intercultural competence is treated as a separable language skill, similar to traditional micro skills such as speaking, listening, reading, and writing. The tasks used are forms of enactment tasks in which a learner is asked to perform the role of a communicator in an intercultural situation. Common formats for such tasks include role plays and simulations used to test interaction norms, pragmatic norms, intercultural mediation tasks, and discourse completion tasks. Key considerations in assessment design for intercultural language teaching and learning. The elicitation procedure or task needs to involve interaction in the target language with other users of that language. The task elicits learners' awareness of the language-culture nexus in such interactions and requires that, for the purpose of assessment, learners are able to analyze, explain, and elaborate this awareness. The elicitation procedure positions the learner as a both participant and analyzer in interaction. Assessment procedures need to elicit learners' understanding of different perspectives in the interaction as an ethical concern. The assessment process shouldn't be episodic but consist of a connected scheme of a range of elicitation procedures. Elicitation procedures are considered within a long-term perspective that allows development and progress. The assessment includes self-assessment procedures that recognize learning as a personal process and a personal unique accomplishment.